Sophia told me that she would be going on a business trip in the next few days. I saw a photo of the two of them face to face on her assistant David's circle of friends. It seems that he is not on a business trip, but on a honeymoon. But I didn't care. Instead, I took this opportunity to ask Sophia for $100,000. I know Sophia. She has David with her now. In order to avoid my suspicion, she will definitely fulfill my requests. But I sent her the message half an hour ago and she still hasn't transferred the money. No way, they have been in love for so long. I was just thinking about whether I should call to ruin their atmosphere, when I received a call from the police, informing me that Sophia had died in a car accident and asked me to go and collect the body. Dead? When I heard the news, I immediately told the salesperson who sells luxury watches to keep him for a few days and I would pay after I finished my personal affairs. Then I asked my assistant to buy a plane ticket for me. Fortunately, the two places were not far away, and I arrived at the scene of the incident in half a day. From a distance, I saw David kneeling beside Sophia's body, crying heartbreakingly. If you didn't know, you would think he was the deceased's husband. I took a few steps forward and the police saw me, told me what had happened and asked me what I was going to do with the body. Sophia's death was so tragic that I felt like vomiting after seeing it. I simply turned my head away and said coldly, "Just burn it. I don't want to waste time on such an unfaithful person." I chose the fastest cremation. No. No. David, who was standing by, got anxious after hearing this and refused to let Sophia's body be cremated no matter what. I looked at David and said in a cold tone, "Since you like it so much, I'll give you the ashes after cremation." When David heard me say this, he jumped up and pointed at my nose and cursed, "Do you have any conscience? Sophia is dead." I sneered and continued, "Conscience? As a lover, what qualifications do you have to talk about conscience? People who cheat on their partners don't deserve to talk about conscience." As soon as I finished scolding David, I saw a ghost floating from Sophia's body. I looked over and saw that it was Sophia without a physical body. Her ghost saw me making things difficult for David, and she frowned and blamed me unhappily. I was somewhat shocked to see Sophia's ghost. I was stunned for a moment, and David thought I was guilty. He pulled my arm and dragged me in front of the police. David said with red eyes, "Comrade police, I report that he was the one who caused the car accident." The policeman was a little helpless and wanted to speak. I interrupted him, looked at David, and said impatiently, "If there is no evidence, you are making a false accusation. I can sue you." David gritted his teeth, unable to hold back his anger. I felt bored and kindly reminded him, "I suggest you go back as soon as possible and sort out the things Sophia gave you." I paused and continued, "After all, that was the marital property between Sophia and me. Emily and I are the only heirs to Sophia's estate. Mr. David, guess if I will ask for the money Sophia spent on you back." David, who had been sobbing all the time, suddenly stopped crying. When the police saw David calm down, they quickly asked the male police officer standing nearby to help him out. David left the room, and Sophia wanted to follow him out, but unfortunately, as soon as she reached the door, she was pulled back by an invisible force. I laughed at her viciously and said she deserved it. The policeman who brought me here said to me, "Mr. James, Ms. Sophia's funeral is now in your hands." I think they should have investigated before coming to me, and they knew that Sophia's car accident was indeed an accident. So they just asked me some common questions about Sophia on the way here, and didn't say anything else. I had no interest in looking at Sophia's face, especially after a car accident. Blood and flesh were all over the place. I was afraid I would have a nightmare. After calling my assistant and lawyer to handle it, I prepared to leave. Because I came here in a hurry, although I asked the nanny Emma to pick up Emily from the kindergarten, I was still a little worried. Emily has been particularly clinging to me since she was a child without her mother's company. I was worried that she would not go to bed if I was not around. After I completed the formalities and confirmed with the police station that the assistant would arrive quickly, I went to the airport and caught the next flight. I confirmed that Sophia couldn't seem to leave me. Looking at Sophia floating on the top of the plane, I couldn't help squinting my eyes, secretly happy in my heart. If that's the case, it will be fun. As soon as I got off the plane, I received a video from Emma. In the video, Emily was wearing cute pajamas, blinking her black grape-like eyes, but she refused to sleep and kept calling Dad. It was Emma who said her dad was watching a video and asked her to talk to him, and she sat up and forced a smile at the camera. Emily said coquettishly, "Dad, Emily wants to sleep with you, can you come back?" Emily is 5 years old this year and will go to primary school next year, but there is still a clear babyish tone in her voice, which makes people feel very soft-hearted. I quickened my pace to go home. My assistant helped me arrange a car, and I was home in less than an hour. Emma was reading a picture book with Emily. When she heard me come back, Emily quickly ran to the door to pick me up. I held Emily in my arms to comfort her, took her back to the room, coaxed her to sleep, and read her stories from picture books. It took a long time to finally coax her to sleep. While I was taking care of Emily, I glanced over and saw that Sophia had been sitting on the cushioned windowsill in Emily's room. On weekdays, maybe because she didn't like me, she didn't show much love to Emily, and she didn't spend most of her time with Emily when she got home. So during the time when I coaxed Emily to sleep, Emily didn't mention her mother once. I heard Sophia mumbling. She was saying, "Why doesn't Emily look for her mother?" I thought it was ridiculous. Looking at Emily sleeping obediently on the bed, I kissed Emily and went back to the master bedroom. I didn't intend to show any mercy to Sophia. After sitting at the end of the bed, I spoke to Sophia. It has been 5 years since Emily was born. How many times have you been with Emily in these 5 years? Have you accompanied Emily to the amusement park or coaxed Emily to sleep? How else do you want her to miss you? Emily is more familiar with the driver at home than you are. I looked at Sophia, who I had been married to for 10 years and who had been with David for 3 years. The translucent soul suddenly looked at me. The room was silent for a long time. Her face was full of astonishment, without any trace of her usual arrogance. Sophia asked in shock, "Can you see me?" I didn't answer, I just looked at her like she was an idiot. Sophia sighed and walked to her dressing table and sat down. After making sure she couldn't see herself in the mirror, she remained in shock for a few seconds. I scoffed, crossed my arms over my chest, and said sarcastically, "Why, Miss Sophia can't leave me even in death." After I found out Sophia and David were together, I filed for divorce. But Sophia disagreed, saying that she couldn't live without me and Emily couldn't live without her, and then she rejected my application in various ways. At the worst, I filed a lawsuit in court, but I didn't have the key evidence that Sophia and David were together. Because David was her assistant, even if the two of them went in and out together, there was no way to raise an objection. After several struggles, I let it go for the time being. But from another perspective, it's good to have an ATM machine that doesn't have a sense of existence. It doesn't go home, doesn't cause trouble, and gives money. So I started to buy real estate under Emily's name and continued to run my own business. I have to be wary of Sophia's sudden divorce. But I didn't expect that before Sophia filed for divorce, I would wait for her to pass away. Sophia has no brothers or sisters, and her parents passed away a few years ago, which means that the only heirs to all of Sophia's assets are Emily and I, her husband and her biological daughter. Sophia is such a kind person. We didn't talk much the whole night and I fell asleep quickly. Early the next morning, the assistant sent me the cremation certificate of Sophia's body, as well as a video of Sophia's body being sent into the crematorium. Sophia, who was not far away, had no idea what I was watching, so she came over and saw the video of herself being pushed into the crematorium. "Aren't you sad at all?" Her voice was a dull little. Seeing that I was in a good mood and took a sip of coffee, Sophia frowned. I didn't answer Sophia's question. After finishing my last sip of coffee, I went to Emily's room to wake her up. Emily still needed to go to kindergarten. Emily couldn't get an answer from me. She got a little mad, kept coming closer to me and raised her voice to yell, "James!" Emily, who had just woken up, could not hear Sophia's annoying voice. With a pair of sleepy eyes, she smiled happily in my arms and said coquettishly, "Dad, I'm going to bring a lot of snacks to share with my friends today." While washing up, Emily couldn't help dancing. I smiled with my eyes curved as I helped Emily find the snacks she wanted to bring to school and stuffed them into her school bag. After seeing Emily off and confirming with the lawyer online, I went to Sophia's company. Sophia must be angry, so she didn't react at all, just sitting there with her hands folded across her chest. Of course, it is also possible that Sophia is looking forward to meeting David later, but she will be disappointed. Women are much slower than men in some things, such as seeing through a man. After arriving at the company, we didn't see David. Sophia's secretary Mia already knew about Sophia's situation, and had received a call from my lawyer. She knew what I was going to do, and she was very considerate and helped me arrange a meeting at 2 p.m. Mia took me into Sophia's office and said, "Mr. James, please sit here for a while. I will bring the documents over." After that, Mia hesitated for a while, walked to a filing cabinet, opened the door, and revealed the bedroom hidden inside. Then she said, "If you feel tired, you can also take a rest here." The bedroom contained a large bed, basic wardrobes, and a bathtub. I frowned, thinking of what Sophia and David might have done here, and I lost interest in staying. In other words, this office might have done something. The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. I said with disgust, "It's too dirty here." I avoided Sophia's gaze and took a half step back, raised my hand to wipe the tip of my nose, and then said to Mia, "I'd better go to your office with you." Sophia, who had been quiet the whole time, couldn't help but stare at me. I ignored her anger and motioned for Mia to lead the way. Mia had no choice but to lead the way. It was already noon after I looked at some documents and consulted an expert remotely with my assistant. Sophia also knew what I wanted to do. When I followed Mia to the company cafeteria to eat, Sophia kept following me and scolding me. Speaking of which, we met at the age of 17, fell in love at the age of 18, got married at the age of 23, and now it is the first time I have seen Sophia get so angry. Sophia screamed angrily, "James, how can you sell my shares, you bitch? These are all mine. What qualifications do you have?" Sophia's family background can only be considered ordinary, and her current company is all the result of her hard work, and she is considered the best among her peers. But in the 7th year of marriage, she cheated on her husband. Seeing Mia go to help me get food, I lazily responded to Sophia, "These are mine now." After that, I was too lazy to explain anything. Sophia was obviously stunned. Her eyes were red as she said, "James, you will die." After lunch, I took a short nap and then started the afternoon meeting. Before I even walked into the conference room, I heard a voice from inside. It was David. I leaned against the door and turned my head to look in Sophia's direction. I found it funny to see the expectation flashing in her eyes. "What a stupid woman. Dear shareholders," David's voice came out. Sophia wanted to go in, and glanced at me again and again, but I just wouldn't go in. If I didn't go in, Sophia couldn't go in either, so she could only listen with me. "Miss Sophia has passed away," David's voice came out intermittently. I was afraid that he would ruin my plan, so I stopped being angry with Sophia, opened the door and walked in. I looked at him and sneered, "Assistant David, what a coincidence." David, who was wearing a white suit, trembled when he heard my voice. "Hello, shareholders," I ignored him and greeted the shareholders who had already gathered around. Seeing David still standing in front of where I was going to sit, I put my briefcase in front of me, raised my eyebrows at David and said, "Assistant David, is there anything else?" David is not smart, and he can't hide things, so I can tell what he wants to do by looking at his eyes. Just like the smugness and provocation in his eyes when he saw me after he and Sophia went out to get a room for the first time 3 years ago, it's the same now. At a glance, I knew he wanted to unite these shareholders and use Sophia's shares to get more benefits for himself. But Sophia was blind, and she ignored the calculations in David's eyes. But Sophia saw David's timid eyes when he looked at Miss Charlotte next to him, and just this one look made Sophia feel distressed. Sophia ran over to me and tried to intimidate me with her murderous eyes, shouting, "James, you treat David well, or I will take you with me even if it means going to hell." I sneered in my heart, "TSK, hell?" I ignored Sophia, glanced at Miss Charlotte's fat body, and thought to myself, David's vision is really bad. But I also know David's situation. All the shareholders present here know about David and Sophia. David is now a hot potato. Anyone with a little bit of brains will not touch him. In this way, although Miss Charlotte is out of shape, fortunately she is lustful and willing to spend money on men. I pushed David aside, dragged a chair over and sat on it, and said loudly, "I came here today to talk to you about the future development of the company." As I said that, I turned my head and asked Mia to talk about Sophia's situation to all the shareholders. Mia's expression was not good, but there was nothing she could do, so she could only come forward and tell him about Sophia again. When talking about the car accident, the eyes of all the shareholders on David became more scrutinizing. In the early days of the company, Sophia had no money to hire a driver. If she said that David had nothing to do with this incident, no one would believe it. But there were only David and Sophia in the car. David biting Sophia to death had nothing to do with him. It was an accident, so the police couldn't say anything. Even the look that Ms. Charlotte cast towards David no longer had the original pity in it. David bit his lip, his eyes were very red, his eyelashes kept trembling, and he looked very pitiful. I patted my hands on the table and dropped the bombshell news, "I am not familiar with Sophia's company. After consulting, I plan to sell Sophia's shares. I have always remembered the contributions that shareholders have made to Sophia, so I will give priority to selling shares to shareholders." After that, I took out a stack of my assistant's business cards from my bag, handed them to David, curled my lips, and said sarcastically, "Assistant David, please help give each shareholder a copy of this business card." At first, David was worried that Sophia would favor me, so he was more restrained in front of me. But within 2 months, he realized that Sophia and I were really strangers, so he didn't hide it anymore. From time to time, he would bring the things Sophia gave him and walk around in front of me. Now that I was suddenly giving him orders, David had no time to react and tears started to flow down his cheeks. My lover felt wronged. Sophia was very angry, but she couldn't do anything to me. But Ms. Charlotte came out to defend David. Miss Charlotte waved her hands, smiled, looked at me flatteringly and said, "Mr. James, please give me some face and don't embarrass David's assistant." After that, she asked the assistant standing behind her to take the business card from David. I raised my eyebrows nonchalantly, and after seeing that every shareholder had a business card in their hands, I explained, "I'll give you 3 days to consider. After 3 days, I will contact people to sell these 55% of shares." I stood up and was about to leave, but stopped at the door, turned around to look at David, and said in a cold voice, "Assistant David, you have to remember what I said to you at the police station. I will ask you to return it, so you have to pack it up quickly." After that, I picked up my briefcase and left. The force pulled Sophia, forcing her to follow me step by step out of the company. In the car, Sophia sat next to me and saw that I was determined to sell the shares and make David suffer. She finally gave up struggling, slowed down her voice, and begged, "James, I know I am sorry for you, but I think I have been good to you. Even if I beg you, please sell the shares to Olivia and stop targeting David." Olivia was Sophia's original partner and also a witness at my wedding with Sophia, but I didn't see her just now. I only saw her assistant who attended the meeting on her behalf. I lowered my head and watched the video sent by the kindergarten teacher on my phone. In the video, Emily took out snacks from her bag and distributed them to the children one by one. The children excitedly formed a circle with Emily in the middle. They sang and clapped. Emily was in the middle, smiling with her eyes narrowed into slits, and she was so happy. Sophia didn't get my reply, so she came over and saw Emily's cheerful look. She was about to say something but choked up, and didn't say anything else. She just looked at Emily's cheerful smiling face on the phone again and again. The driver's car stopped in front of the villa. As soon as I got out of the car, I saw the assistant who had hurried back. From the time he accompanied me to the island until now, the assistant has been very busy, and now his eyes are full of fatigue. Thinking of the stack of business cards I had just given out, I suddenly felt guilty and looked at him and said, "I'll double your year-end bonus this year." After saying that, I patted him on the shoulder and walked into the house. Hearing that the year-end bonus would be doubled, the assistant's face became more energetic. He hurried into the room, took out the paper cremation certificate and death certificate, and said enthusiastically, "I have handed these to the lawyer, and they are processing the transfer procedures for you and Ms. Sophia." I took it and looked at it, then deliberately threw it onto the single sofa where Sophia was sitting, and said to the assistant in a gentle tone, "Thank you for your hard work during this period." Then I told him about what happened today. As soon as I finished speaking, the assistant's cell phone rang. He looked at me, got my signal, picked up the phone, turned and on the speakerphone. The woman on the other side panted and said anxiously, "Tell Mr. James that I want his shares." The woman's voice inevitably sounded a little old-fashioned. It was Ms. Charlotte. I took a glass of water and brought it to my lips. At this time and in this tone, I couldn't help but teasingly say, "David is really good at drinking." I didn't agree and asked the driver to pack up and go pick up Emily. Many parents were waiting at the entrance of the kindergarten, and many luxury cars were parked. Emily's kindergarten was a private one, and because of its high threshold, the social circles involved would not have very extreme people. I greeted the parents I met when I picked up Emily. The mother of one of Emily's classmates came up to me with a smile and said to me gently, "Today I saw my Lily eating the snacks Emily brought over. He seemed to like it very much. Could you give me a link?" Lily's mother smiled gently. I quickly sent the link to her phone. Lily's mother quickly called Lily's father, and I tactfully stepped aside and watched the children in the kindergarten interacting with the teacher. Emily saw me, raised her hand to greet me, and blew me a kiss with a smile. Emily is always so well behaved. The teacher also noticed Emily's distraction, smiled at me, and took Emily back to the classroom. Sophia came to my side and looked at the other parents waiting around. She asked with a guilty conscience, "You always came alone to pick up the kids before." I glanced at her impatiently and responded sarcastically, "ISN Emily Tess' mother dead?" Sophia was choked instantly. She had been holding her breath because of what I did in the afternoon, and now she was choked again. Her face was darker than seaweed. Seeing her gloomy face, I felt so happy. Having been in love with Sophia for many years and married for so long, I have always been the one who knows how to hurt her. However, because I still need her to be an ATM machine, I always try not to hurt her, but now it is different. Without scruples, I am no longer worried. As soon as school was over, Emily ran to me, hugged my hand and said goodbye to the teacher. Back in the car, Emily waved her little hands in the air and told me the interesting things that happened that day. Suddenly, Emily looked at me with eyes wide open and said, "Today Nora said that everyone has a father and a mother, but I only have a father." "Why?" There was no grievance or confusion in Emily's tone, only curiosity. I was relieved. I had made plans since Emily was born, so even though Sophia would occasionally come back to see Emily, I was always reluctant to let her see her. Even if she did, she would only come after Emily went to bed. When Emily grew up and Sophia's parents passed away, Sophia was always busy accompanying David and came back less often. So Emily really had no impression of her mother. Sophia looked at me, seeming to be looking forward to what I would say. I ignored Sophia, hesitated for a while, and decided to tell Emily the truth. Unlike other children, Emily was a little precocious, more well-behaved and sensible. I wanted to get along with Emily as a half-parent and half-friend. I calmly recounted the entanglement between Sophia and I over the past decade. To be honest, when I talked about discovering that Sophia had cheated on me, I still couldn't be as calm as I imagined. My eyes couldn't help but moisten, and everything in front of me was blurry. I saw Sophia trying to reach out to wipe my tears, which was ridiculous. I lifted Emily from the seat, held her in my arms, and said, "But Dad has Emily. With Emily, he is no longer afraid." Emily also knew what happened next. She hugged my neck and cried for a long time. Emily let me go only after the car stopped at the yard of our home. Emily blinked her bright black eyes several times to stop the tears from falling. She looked at me seriously and said, "Dad, Emily won't hurt you. Emily will protect Dad." She looked so cute and adorable, I couldn't help laughing. I hugged her tightly and said gently, "Okay, Daddy believes in you." After Emily followed the nanny Emma into the house, I stayed in the car for a while, staring at the passenger seat in a daze. When I was talking to Emily just now, Sophia also listened to the whole thing. Perhaps she never thought that everything she did would be so cruel from another perspective. Sophia did not make any sound. Sophia's voice suddenly sounded a little annoying. After all, I stayed in the car just because I wanted to be alone for a while, and I didn't want to hear any of her confessions or complaints. I pushed the door open and left on my own. Sophia didn't move, but as I left, she was pulled by an invisible force and had no choice but to follow me. And just like that, time quickly came to the third day. After sending Emily to kindergarten, I went to Sophia's company again. Mia picked me up and went straight to the meeting room. Before coming here, I had already discussed the situation with my assistant in the car. Although Sophia's company is developing well, the one who called in the past 3 days and offered the best conditions was Ms. Charlotte. After that call, Ms. Charlotte called again and offered even better conditions. Although Sophia knew my plan, she did not struggle in anger as before. Before entering the meeting room, she just begged me not to be so cruel to David. It seems that she is really interested in David. Thinking of the message my assistant just sent me, I did not respond to Sophia's words, but opened the door of the conference room with great interest. I wonder if Sophia will still be soft-hearted towards David after seeing everything in the conference room. The door of the conference room was slowly pushed open, and at first glance, I saw David sitting next to Ms. Charlotte. Unlike the sunny and cheerful college student he used to be, David's current dress style was entirely to please Ms. Charlotte, a wealthy woman. Ms. Charlotte was well known in the industry for her love of supporting male models. I said jokingly, "Interesting. It seems that my guess is true. The two of them really got entangled after the last meeting." The panting when Ms. Charlotte called for the first time was because David served her comfortably. Seeing me walk into the meeting room in a casual suit, David raised his chin, his intention of showing off clearly in front of him. I glanced at Sophia, who jumped to David's side. I have seen Sophia's expression change too many times in recent days, so I am no longer surprised. I pushed my chair aside and sat down. I glanced at the shareholders present and said in a deep voice, "We have received a lot of calls in the past few days. After consideration, I decided to sell my shares to Ms. Charlotte." After that, I took the contract that had been drafted by a lawyer from my assistant, handed it to Ms. Charlotte, and then said, "It's a pleasure to work with you." Ms. Charlotte took her hand off David's thigh, flipped through it several times, confirmed the terms of the contract, signed it, and said happily, "Mr. James, it's a pleasure to work with you." Sophia had already exhausted herself and lay on the ground with a pale face. Listening to the noisy sounds around me, I could vaguely hear Sophia mumbling, "What on earth did I do for such a man?" No matter how sad Sophia is now, it has little to do with me. David saw that he had gotten what he wanted, and he didn't care about the occasion. He hugged Ms. Charlotte's neck and kissed her. Ms. Charlotte was coaxed and felt very happy. She waved her hand at me complacently and said, "Mr. James, please let David go." Those in the conference room who did not get shares looked up, curious about what would happen next. I was naturally happy to give Ms. Charlotte this face, so I tilted my head and continued, "But Ms. Charlotte also knows that Assistant David spent a lot of my wife's money. I can choose not to provoke, but what belongs to Emily and me, no one can take it away." David looked aggrieved and said to Ms. Charlotte coquettishly, "Ms. Charlotte, David's voice was like honey, so sweet. Miss Charlotte was happy to please the little wolf dog. She motioned to the assistant beside her to take out a card and said calmly, I roughly estimated the money for various things in David's place. The money in here should be enough. After that, Ms. Charlotte winked at me greasily and said ambiguously, if Mr. James has any problems in the future, you can come to me. I didn't bother to answer her. After all, this was probably the second time we had met. I took the card and replied calmly, congratulations to Ms. Charlotte on her new boyfriend. When I left the company, I looked back. The tall buildings were rising into the sky, and people were coming in and out in an endless stream. I was a little dazed, as if I was back in college. At that time, Sophia, who was still young and immature, hugged James, who was also young, and said that she would treat him well for the rest of her life. But in the end, things have changed. Seeing the assistant following carefully behind me, I couldn't help laughing. Now that I'm done with my work, I'll give you a few days off. The assistant looked at me in surprise, but soon asked cautiously, what about the year-end bonus? Am I the kind of boss who exploits my employees? I couldn't help it, and knocked him on the head with my bag, and then said, if you ask again, the year-end bonus will not be doubled. The assistant begged for mercy quickly. The next time I got the news about David, it was from the assistant. Although Miss Charlotte was very wealthy, she never kept idle people. The reason why she stood up for David was just because she was attracted by David's good looks and good figure. In the past, Miss Charlotte couldn't eat because Sophia was around, and now she's tired of eating too much. It is easy to go from frugality to luxury, but it is difficult to go from luxury to frugality. Without Miss Charlotte, there are other rich women. David soon became a hated character in the circle, and finally got sick and died in a small alley in winter. Coincidentally, it was also after that day that Sophia left completely. Since that day when she saw the other side of David, Sophia has been completely silent. Many times I would forget that there is a ghost of Sophia around me, but fortunately I don't care about her and live a comfortable life every day. As a human being, happiness is the most important thing. An exclusive sequel to the story for channel members. Remember to like and follow to show your support. More than a decade has passed, and Emily, who has grown up to be more beautiful, has become an internet celebrity because of a photo of her college admission ID. Out of her interest in acting, Emily entered the entertainment industry after several considerations. Emily was very stubborn about this matter. I suggested that I use my connections to help her find better scripts, but she disagreed. Emily started with small roles in the entertainment industry. Whether it was a supporting role that only appeared once, or a female lead with a lot of scenes, Emily would immerse herself in repeatedly pondering the details, very attentively, and very happily. The only trouble might be that Emily goes home less often. It was the end of summer again. Emily came back from the crew and ran to me, asking if I would like to participate in a variety show with her. This was a family variety show that focused on family relationships. Emily looked at me coquettishly and said, I haven't traveled with my dad for a long time, so I wanted to take him with me. Outside, Emily is a top actress in the entertainment industry who is loved by thousands of fans. In front of me, Emily is always like this, well-behaved and sensible, but also acts like a spoiled child from time to time. Perhaps because she was worried that I would not agree, Emily held my arm and swayed back and forth, and continued to act like a spoiled child and shouted, Dad. I nodded helplessly and said, okay. Just on the third day after I agreed, the filming crew arrived at the villa. The assistant director pushed his glasses up as if feeling guilty, looked at me and said, Mr. James, we are here to record the pilot. Emily had already told me about this in advance, and I followed her to sit in front of the camera. The staff asked Emily many questions about her childhood, and I answered them one by one, with Emily's complaints in between to liven up the atmosphere. The whole recording went smoothly. The first stop of the variety show was Hawaii. Because it was a slow variety show, there weren't many cameramen around, so we had a great time. The days passed and soon we arrived at the final stop. The last stop was Miami, where the weather was pleasant. Emily was assigned by the director to do other tasks, so I had to go to the zoo with her. The grass and trees were green and the scenery was beautiful. Seeing that I was holding food in my hand, the peacocks quickly surrounded me. After playing for a while, when Emily came back, we went to the beach to have a barbecue. The sky was full of twinkling stars, maybe because of the wine. Emily's cheeks were flushed, her eyes were full of sparkle. She looked at me and said, Dad, I have wanted to take you out for a trip for a long time. By the end of her words, Emily was already crying. I smiled and held her in my arms, coaxing her to sleep like I did when she was little, and comforted her. Emily is very strong now. Emily rarely made me worry about anything when she was growing up. She had her own thoughts and would consider the pros and cons. Even when she didn't know something, she would not blindly move forward, but would turn back and ask me what to do. Entering the entertainment industry was something Emily had considered for a long time, and obviously, she succeeded and became a shining star. I am very proud and happy to have such a child. At the end of the variety show, Emily continued to join the crew, but she would not work as hard as before. After each drama, Emily would give herself 2 months of rest and come back to accompany me, who has entered old age. I have handed over the company to a professional manager a long time ago. I spend my days shopping and going out. When I have free time, I play golf and travel with a few friends. I can still live happily without a significant other.